Hi, I'm Mike Gafa, and on today's Whiteboard Wednesday, I want to talk to you about an idea called multi-tier budgeting. I'm going to frame it up this way. There is a span of God's economy that we can kind of think of as it relates to budgeting for our churches or ministries. So on the one hand, Philippians 4:19 says that God meets all our needs according to his glory, riches in Christ Jesus. And so kind of as it relates to churches and ministry, we can think of it this way, that God seems to give us what we need and when we need it. Even when we feel like we need more, God tends to give us what we need and when we need it, and that's absolutely true. On the other side of the spectrum is Ephesians 3:20, that God can do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. And if you're a pastor or a leader of any sort in ministry or in a church context, you probably have experienced both sides of the equation here. You probably experienced some times where finances got really tight and you started to wonder, how are we going to make this work? And yet God seems to provide what you need and when you need it. On the other hand, there may be other times, Ephesians 3:20, where God does immeasurably more than you can ask or imagine by a significant gift that you didn't see coming, or a family that is of some means, and all of a sudden the finances flow and God blesses you very richly in ways that you didn't see as a church or ministry. So in between Philippians 4:19 and Ephesians 3:20 is where we live, and this multi-tier idea sort of takes into account all of that. So here's how it works. In tier 1, we want to think about that as 90% of the budget proper. This 100% represents your budget that you set. 90% though is necessary spending. And by that we're talking about things that are absolutely essential to the ministry or church. So there are some things that are pretty obvious. You got to pay your utilities, fixed costs for human resources, denominational assessments, etc. But also, things that you have to do in order to be on mission as a church. And so those are tier 1 things. And I want to challenge you to find about 90 cents on the dollar that lands right here. The next 10%, it's still in your budget, but we're going to call this discretionary funds. So the idea there is if God blesses you with budgeted giving, those funds are in play. If, however, an unforeseen shortage or family moves, or for whatever reason giving comes in less, we want to be thinking proactively about what we would do as good stewards of what God provides for us. So there's the delineation between what's necessary, what's discretionary that we think we should spend to be on mission, but we wouldn't have to if money got tight. And it's good to be thinking about that ahead of time rather than in the moment when it's a crisis situation. And it doesn't end there. You go over to tier 3, and we don't often think of this, but we want to think in terms of vision. So there's a third tier, and you'll notice there's no percentage on it. This is the sort of tier of God can do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. And if that happens, I think it's good to be able to name some of those things that God is giving you in the way of a vision as a church or a ministry, and kind of putting that out there as sort of on the radar. And so if provision does come in, that as a leadership team, be it consistory, elders, deacons, pastors, whatever, that you can very strategically and prayerfully know what you're going to invest in on that. And so 90%, 10% here, that makes for 100, that's budget proper, and then vision out here. And then finally, I want to caution you on one thing, and that is to avoid taking a linear approach, And what I mean is this, that I think our tendency in our human way of thinking is, well, if this comes in, we'll spend all that first, and if we get 100% to the budget, we'll do this, and if we don't get anything in addition, we won't do any of this stuff. And what I want to challenge you to think is prayerfully, strategically, are there some things that are out here in vision that are more pressing than the discretionary items in Tier 2? It's possible and oftentimes likely that investing in at least some aspects of vision are much more pertinent or appropriate than are just spending to the budget. And oftentimes, because vision has a way of catalyzing people, it excites people. People want to give to vision, especially when they can see things come to fruition. It actually has a way of increasing the overall budget or overall giving levels. So there is your Whiteboard Wednesday for today. If you want to have a conversation around this, send me an email. It's mike@luminexusa.org, and I'd be happy to do that with you. Thanks.